Hey folks, welcome to Your Inspired Life. My name's Amy, and if you're new here, I wanted to let you know a little bit more about Your Inspired Life. It's a space that I created to give you a place to come for motivation, for tips and inspiration to stay on track with your goals. A lot of times people struggle with the mindset and the energy that it takes to stay on track in order to achieve long-term goals, especially when they're goals about your health, whether it's weight loss or a fitness level, or even just trying to stay healthy for the long haul. A lot of times these goals are connected to bigger life goals about things that we want to do with our life. So a solid foundation of good health habits is essential. And so my job here is to help you do that. Today's topic is improving your sleep by making changes in your diet. So that's where I'm going to go first. As a registered dietitian, I have a solid background in nutrition, and I've helped a lot of clients make changes in their diet to improve their sleep. So we're going to get to it. Well, I bet you could have guessed what my first piece of advice would be about changes in your diet, and that's to look at the caffeine intake that you have. So I know as much as a lot of us love coffee or tea, even energy drinks and soda, we tend to get a lot of caffeine in our day, and that can affect sleep in the evening. So two things about this. One is you want to, if you can, try to get an estimate of how much caffeine that you're taking in the day, and maybe try and cutting that number in half. For example, a 12-ounce Starbucks kind of coffee has around 180 milligrams of caffeine in it. So if you're drinking 12 ounces of really strong coffee, or you're drinking twice that, maybe you're having 2 big cups of coffee a day, you can see how it adds up really fast. The first thing I would do is try to cut that number in half. Can you reduce the amount of caffeine by 50%? The other thing is to consider what time of day that you're taking in the caffeine. Some people are slow metabolizers. So a good portion of the population, and I'm one of those people, I'm a slow metabolizer of caffeine. I was able to find this out about myself using a genetic test, but I had the genetic marker for being a slow caffeine metabolizer. That means caffeine stays in my system a lot longer than other people. So if I drink caffeine past noon, and even if it's a small amount, it seems to affect me in the evening. I don't feel sleepy. You might have an idea if you're a slow metabolizer if you have something that has a lot of caffeine and it really tends to affect you more than somebody else. So in addition to reducing it by 50%, the other thing that you could try doing is limiting the time of day that you have your caffeine. So maybe nothing past noon or nothing past 10 a.m. Sometimes I have to follow that rule. I don't really go past 10 a.m. with any kind of caffeine intake. So try that one out and see if that makes a difference for you. Change number two is going to be related to alcohol. So in a different kind of way, alcohol, I know it's a depressant, it's not a stimulant like caffeine, but it can still trigger problems with sleep in the evening time. I know you're thinking, oh, if I drink a lot, I just pass right out. But what happens is that it doesn't let you enter the deep sleep cycles. You kind of stay in a light sleep. And so it's not replenishing, you don't get the immune system repair, and you don't get those deep levels of sleep. In fact, what alcohol can do and what it can trigger is it can trigger a low blood sugar while you're sleeping. And what that causes is an increase of cortisol production. That's your stress hormone, and that can be what wakes you up. I notice for me, if I have alcohol too close to bedtime, or if it's a large amount of alcohol, then I tend to wake up in the middle of the night and have a really hard time falling back to sleep. So two things you could try. One is the similar with the caffeine, is try having your alcohol a little bit earlier, maybe before dinner versus after dinner, and then try cutting it back by 50%, or doing some experiments, cutting it back by 100%. Maybe you're really monitoring your alcohol intake, but it's definitely worth experimenting with. I think a lot of folks are under the impression that alcohol helps them get to sleep, but it doesn't allow you to stay asleep. Overall, it just shortchanges you on the good quality sleep that you need to be healthy and have energy the next day. Okay, so for the next tip, this one is not necessarily a food group, but it's about eating times. So another change number 3 that you can make in your diet is to not eat 2 hours before going to bed. People that tend to eat a large amount of food before they go to bed have the same trouble not entering the deep sleep cycles. The body is so consumed with digestion that it's not entering the deep cycles of sleep. So what you could do is If you kind of know what your bedtime is, try to back up a couple of hours and have that be a sleep cutoff time. I know sometimes you might find yourself getting a little bit snackish right before you go to bed, and it's like, oh gosh, I could eat something right now. And if I don't, I feel like I'm going to wake up. And you might do something really, really light, like a half a piece of fruit or something like that. But really stay away from anything that's going to be heavy or be more of a really large snack right before bed. Whether it's a big snack or your actual meal, try not to have anything in that 2-hour window before going to sleep, and you'll see that makes a big improvement as well. Okay, who's ever used Tums or omeprazole, right? If you've ever had reflux problems, you know what I'm talking about. You lie down, whether you had a heavy meal, but you're lying down and it's like your food is just stuck in your throat. You just feel like you've got heartburn all night, and that really can keep you awake. So my tip number 4 is to reduce the foods that are triggers for reflux or heartburn. And for most people, that's alcohol, which we already covered, or it could be caffeine, which we already covered, or some other ones are mint, high-fat foods, and spicy foods. Those are some of the big ones, even chocolate's in there. So if you feel like, for you, if you've ever noticed that you really struggle with heartburn or reflux and you've had to take Tums, or you've just noticed that you've just got this burning sensation or burping sensation all night long and it's hard to fall asleep, really cutting back on the reflux triggered foods can be key for you. So that would be my tip number 4. So we're up to change number 5, and I think you're going to find this one a little bit surprising. So first of all, this has to do with carbohydrates and something that I've noticed with myself, but also something that I noticed that happens with low carb or very low carb diets. So if you're doing keto, definitely take this into consideration if this is a factor for you. You might not have noticed it yet. But what I found is that for folks that are doing ultra low carb and they're not doing any carbs at dinner, is that they tend to have a more disrupted sleep. They seem to be waking up more, tossing and turning more, and that when you do a higher carbohydrate at night, like say you throw a potato in with your dinner or some beans or some rice, they tend to sleep more soundly. And I think this is because of how carbohydrates tend to produce hormones like serotonin and dopamine that goes into the production of those, which are your relaxing hormones. Let me know if you've ever noticed this, if you've ever done a really, really low carb dinner, like a salad with maybe some steak or some fish, and then compare it to a night where you do a little bit higher carb and see if you can notice a difference. Another thing that can happen with low carb, really low carb, and this I've heard happens more with women, is that sometimes staying on a really, really low carb diet for a while can increase stress hormones, increase cortisol, and that is more of a wake-up hormone. It's hard to really get into a deep, comfortable sleep if you have elevated levels of cortisol. So hopefully these are useful tips that you might be able to apply, whether it's being able to fall asleep or maintain a really deep sleep, because there's a lot of things we can talk about, but these are just dietary specific changes that you could make that might improve your sleep quality. I think I'll talk later about other options that you can do to improve sleep, things that we call sleep hygiene and things you can do in your environment. But definitely give some of these diet changes a try and see if that's a good place to start and if it makes any difference for you. And let me know how it goes. Leave me a comment below. We'll catch up with you next time, guys. Take care and sleep well. Bye-bye.